Hi, everyone. Welcome to our 11th edition of uLaw webinar. We've been doing this series of webinars this year and the later part of last year. We're extremely thankful to the legal community in Ontario who've supported us heavily on this. And for the first time, we're now doing a webinar that includes the BC members, and we are offering free CPD as well. So as a housekeeping item, at the end of the webinar, you need to send us an email at info@ulawpractice.com stating that you've attended the webinar in full. We will be submitting the list to both Ontario and BC based on your your email. So please mention if you are from Ontario or BC. That makes it a little easy for us. So please take the time to do that. In Ontario, this CPD is an hour and a half of credit, while in BC, it's only 1 hour. So I want to make that very clear. What we will be covering here in Everything Practice Management is, topics in the range of client intake, service, and communication. We'll be talking about file management. We'll be using our software in conjunction just to explain, how file management can be done. We'll talk about financial management. We'll talk about business management, professional management, time management, and personal management. These are some of the top-level areas that we'll be covering, and we'll also get into details about, how the softwares in general can help a practice, a legal practice. Going on to the next slide, professional obligation. There are several steps that you need to do as you're doing a client intake and a service and a communication in your practice. Now, the first and most important one is detailed recording of the call and consultation. As you are engaging with the client, we strongly recommend that you kind of record all the details of what this call is all about and what the consultation is all about. It's very important that you establish clearly the criteria under which you will be representing the client. The next important criteria that we want to actually bring to effect in terms of client intake is the conflict check for confidential information. Now, conflict checks can be performed in several ways. A key element of conflict check is making sure that not only you perform the conflict check and you have the document established on what the conflict check is, but you also document how you actually resolve it. So just to give you an example, in this matter, in this client, let's say Peter Chen, when you actually click on conflict check and you do a conflict check, a document preparation, something like this, where it tells you all the people whom you consulted in the past, who you potentially think are the conflicts, will be good. Like, for example, in this case, Peter could be Peter Chen, Peter this, maybe someone inside this corporation has a Peter, so a Chen and a Chen very close to each other. Like, a document like this is very helpful to actually, make sure you have documented how you did the conflict check. But on top of it, what you also need to do is you need to have a conflict check document where you actually outline how this conflict was actually resolved. And to go through that steps, I'll tell you the steps taken, who did the conflict check, and all those things need to be there. So a good conflict screening form, if you have that in your practice, that can really go a long way. So you fill in the name of the person who did it, the client, whether it was a new client or not, right? What were the steps taken? If there was no conflict, you can just say no conflict. But if there was a conflict, like, how did you resolve it? Was the retainer declined? Having all these things well documented, this is just one such template, but having all these things well documented can actually go a long way as far as conflict check is concerned. So once you've recorded all your detailed calls and consultations, you've finished all your conflict check, the key important task is to determining a fee structure for this matter. It's very important that not only you bring your fee, to your client, you also need to bring in other fees that could be there as part of this matter. Like, for example, if you plan to use assistants, you may want to clearly establish what your assistant rates are. If you plan to use more than one lawyer or more than one legal professional or more than one paralegal, you may want to establish that as well and say what are the fees associated with each of these professionals whom you're bringing for this matter. And also, as you kind of determine that, document that very easily, probably in the form of a retainer letter or something like that. Okay. The next step is accepting a retainer and depositing that into trust and providing a proper receipt. So let's go through that notion. Like, let's say we have accepted a $1,000 retainer. We definitely, first of all, when you accept a $1,000 retainer, you've got to make sure that you're always depositing that only in the trust account and you're not depositing it in your general account. And also providing a proper receipt, for that with a proper duplicate can go in a long way. And now when you generate one such retainer, also make sure that it is in the language of what the client can actually communicate. So make sure that you brand your retainer receipts because, this is a client-facing document. So, at the end of the day, they're going to have this and, they can use that for referral clients. Make sure you have that. Make sure the receipt has the following details. Like, it has a receipt number. Make sure it has, who you received it from, the address, how it was actually paid, and also indicate, make sure that the signature of yourself and the client is both there, especially, if it's a cash transaction. Like, make sure that that's being captured. Now, if it's a cash transaction, you got to be a little more careful on the retainer side. The cash has to be deposited into the trust account within 24 hours. So ensure that you park the cash separately, make a detailed receipt indicating that this was a cash, and then you can also make sure that you go to the bank physically and then drop it off and deposit it into the bank so that the bank ledger and the software that you're using, the two ledgers match either in the same date or maximum by one date. So you want to make sure that when you're accepting retainers as cash, you do that. The next thing is sometimes it can so happen the clients are ghost clients and, they could be, not engaging you. In that case, it's always wise to provide a proper letter of non-engagement just in case, if you're not planning to continue on this matter. So in terms of professional obligation, in terms of client intake, some 5 key takeaways that we want you to carry from this webinar is detailed recording of calls and consultations, conflict check. Conflict check, again, as I spoke, has 2 parts. One is how you did the conflict check, and 2, how you resolve the conflict check. The third thing is determining the fees and fees for this matter. Make sure that assistants, other legal professionals whom you will be using, disbursement rates, everything is captured properly. The last thing is retainer deposits, and then providing a proper non-engagement letter if you actually have. So now let's get into each of these details. When you create a retainer agreement, what are some of the details that you actually need to put into play? The first and most important thing is the nature and scope. You got to define what work will you be doing, clearly indicate your responsibilities, also clearly indicate the client responsibilities so that there's a very clear understanding between the 2 parties on what is going to be actually done. A schedule and a course of representation, how it's going to be done, what are the key dates that we will be representing, what he needs to do needs to be clearly mentioned. Method and frequency of communication needs to be mentioned. This is something that the Law Society is constantly emphasizing more, especially in this day and age when there are a lot of cloud services. When you're using email, you want to clearly indicate that you are using email and the risk associated with email. Maybe you're using some cloud software for actually document management. You want to clearly state that and the risk associated with that. The retainer arrangements are always a good thing to capture in the retainer letter. Like let's say he's giving you a $1,000 retainer. You want to indicate that in the retainer letter. And then, termination details. Like, a lot of times we talk about the good, but, it's always good to have a termination clause so that, some matters don't come back to haunt you. And legal practitioners and clients' confidentiality, like how you're planning to maintain that, what are some of the, conditions that you have put into place to actually maintain confidentiality. And finally, the risk associated with certain methods of communication. So let's walk through a standard sample of a retainer letter. Let's say we do a retainer letter and download. We want to touch upon all these points that we have talked here in our retainer letter. So I'm going to open this retainer letter. Description of services, clearly indicating what the matter is, the file number. Very important, again, that you brand it, because this letter is, again, a client communication letter. So the more you brand it, the better it is, because, your logo, your letterhead, if it's present, it's always good. Have a proper fee structure. Clearly indicate, the hourly rate, what are you going to do with travel time, all that details. Expenses, how you're going to charge disbursements. If there's a mileage associated, you want to be very clear on that. If there's a payment issue, you want to clearly state the interest that you'll be charging. If there's a retainer that you just accepted, what's your retainer, you want to mention that. Very important that you mention the termination of legal services, the agreement, and the communication, and kind of associating risk associated with email communication. You want to state all that stuff. Make sure that not only you sign, the client also signs. It's very important that, that level of clarity is there in the retainer. Moving on to our next subject, which is basically file management. Now, file management is very critical to a practice, basically because you want to be very organized, not just for efficiency in your practice, but also for accounting reasons. The more organized you are in terms of what you're doing in the matter, dockets in the matter, and expenses in the matter, the more easier it will be to actually invoice the client, recognize the revenue, and also have all your proper documentation. So the first and most important one is making sure that you have a checklist of discerning incoming matters, right? You have to have an active matter checklist, an archived matter checklist, and a closed matter checklist. Okay. Confirmation that the conflict check was actually completed. You want to make sure that you did it and you indicated that you have actually completed it. Always make sure that you have separate files for each matter that you represent. Clearly in this, in this matter, for example, Peter Chen, he's a repeat customer, right? He came once he's now coming for a small claims, but in the past he has come for an impaired driving matter. So clearly you want to have a separate file number for that and a very, very separate file number for this. I'm just using the software as a reference to showcase, but in whatever software, even if you're doing it manually, keeping a separate file number irrespective of the fact that it's a repeat client is very, very important. Then you want to chronologically organize, your matters and your documents. It's very key that you establish a clear chronological way in which you can approach and see how you've done things. For example, if you go to a particular matter, you want to clearly know that when you did what and when, and all the events are all there. For example, this was done on May the 12th, at 11:30 a.m. That's when you had the client meeting. What did you do there? Basically, you inform Peter about to ask him to get the opponent information. Peter provided you with a $1,000 retainer, and we talked about the fee structure. So clearly document, everything in a chronological way so that, it's very easy for you to access. And then record every event that happened, even if it's a simple telephone conversation. You want to record that. You want to you're talking to the client. You want to have a stop clock, a physical clock or something like that going. And then, when you're done with it, right then and there, you want to say telephone conversation, and you record that. So recording key elements chronologically helps you because you kind of now know what are all billed and what are all not billed in 2 minutes. Okay. Finally, proper organization with a numeric indexing. So what we mean by that is like, in a very quick way, you should be able to say, hey, who are all the clients whom I'm meeting? And this is like, in a chronological order in date. You should be able to sort it by date or by title, in alphabetically or by client. Maintaining this list is very key because it kind of gives you an idea who are all the clients when you talk to them and, what you did with them very quickly. And the reason why, they are asking numeric indexing is because it's always easier to search when things are numerically indexed. Let's move on to the next obligation, which is financial management. The most important one is establishing a proper fee scheduling structure, an hourly rate, recording the billable time, client files, and a proper accounting system that backs up your invoicing process and your trust and your general process. That's very key. Financial management has two benefits. One, obviously, you will make the money at the right time, the right way. Like, if you have financial management built into your practice, what will happen is you'll clearly identify if a matter is not invoiced. Like, if you should know in 2 seconds, oh, an invoice is pending. Like, that's the key element of financial management. And similarly, in 2 seconds, you should be able to say, oh, what have I done on this matter, and how do I actually, it looks like there's not much that's happened on this matter. So you should be able to figure that out in a couple of seconds. Okay. Now, similar to that, you want to also make sure that you're recording all the billable time and you have a proper timesheet, for all the client files. Okay. Prompt transmission of delivery of invoices to client is also very key to make sure that your financial management is sound. That means getting paid for the invoices that you raised and raising the invoices at the proper time is very key. Most matters are not small matters. It's not they're not like notary where the person just came in, you did the work, and you got paid. Small claims matters and some of the family matters, criminal matters can drag on for several months, and you don't want to be not paid for so many months. So as you are regularly docketing, you want to also regularly invoice the client so that you can pay yourself and you can also run a proper business. You can pay your staff. You can do all that stuff. So properly sending invoices at the right time is very important. It's very key. And also making sure that the invoice is actually getting paid is also very key. Okay. You also want to systematically track an overpayment or an underpayment on an account. Like, for example, if the client owes outstanding, say, $500 on an invoice, if accidentally he pays you $600, you don't want to deposit that in general. You want to be very careful here because it's an overpayment. You want to make sure that this amount actually goes into a trust account and you only withdraw $500 and leave the $100 for future withdrawal. Obviously, you need to talk to the client and make sure that that's what he intended. But making sure that overpayments are not hitting the general is very important. Recording general accounts, general accounts with proper receipts and disbursement entries is also very key. The reason why it's very key is because disbursements are very complex. Disbursements can be of several types. Now, the most recommended way of doing disbursements is directly paying from trust. The reason why it's a good way is basically because it's client's money sitting in trust account. You use it to pay disbursement. It's pretty straightforward and simple. You don't have to even invoice it. It's all easy. But not all times that's possible. Maybe you had to pay a court fee and you did not have your trust check. So there will be several instances where disbursement or out-of-pocket expenses can actually happen from general. Now, when it happens from general, capturing them properly, in your recording system and making sure that you raise invoice so that you get paid for that disbursement that you raised is very key. So that's why we strongly recommend that you record the disbursements when they happen. Like, for example, I'm just going to take a quick matter here. Let's say, this careless driving matter. And when I go into disbursements, like you clearly want to segregate your disbursements into several ways. Like, for example, there is a retainer. So let's accept a small retainer here. I'm going to accept, say, $1,000 retainer. Sometimes you might even do a credit card payment, like, if that's the case, like, you can accept credit card payments. You can say, I want to collect that, validate it, get the person's credit card. Now, a key advantage of, getting money paid by a credit card is, the retainer is right there. I mean, if it's a check, you're always worried about, like, will the check actually bounce, all that stuff. But if you actually do it this way, it's pretty easy, and you've actually collected the funds right when it happened. Now, when you collect funds, there's always, some code, a unique reference that's given to you as part of this transaction. Now, you want to collect that and establish that right into your retainer process. So you can say here, hey, it was collected using credit card, right? And that's the reference number. The reason why the reference number is very important is because when you apply that reference number later on, when you actually produce your ledgers, it's right there. Like, oh, this is a credit card transaction, and you can look up to your bank and say, yeah, this matches with that. Now, let's move on to the disbursement topic. When you pay disbursement from trust, right, clearly you're paying from the receipt amount. So you can just say, hey, the $75, right, was a trust check that I made to pay for court fee, and it was to Brampton Courthouse, right? Now, clearly, the money left, the trust account, and, clearly you see here now the trust receipts has now gone down by that amount. So if I hit the question mark, it clearly tells me, hey, $1,000 came in, and, the $925 has left. So that means, like, the percentage left is so much. But when I look at the ledgers, it also clearly shows me that $1,000 was received and $75 is left. So a very, very, very simple, way to record it can actually go a long way in establishing a proper, disbursement strategy. Now, when you receive from general, the whole point is very different. When you actually click on new disbursement and receive from general, you are actually saying, let's say it's an application fee, and it is, say, $65, and then you add, either the HST, or if it's British Columbia, you add the GST and the PST, and you basically say, who did you pay to? Let's say in this case it was, Municipality of, Vancouver, right? You can actually say, I actually paid it using my credit card, and this could be a business credit card, and hit the save button. Now, what happened is you paid for this expense, and the client hasn't paid you yet. So he owes you that money, $65 plus HST, which is $73.45, and that's not, in your general account. The only way you can receive that money is properly doing what's been stated in the guidelines, which is like, invoicing the client and then getting it back, okay? So let's go to the next one, which is like, maintaining original bank statements, bank books, cancellation of checks, because like sometimes you would issue a check and then you want to cancel it. You want to have the documentation, detailed duplicate deposit slips. It's all very key to actually maintain as part of financial management. Finally, preparation of financial statements, like, income statement, expense statements, annual budgets. These things are more to gauge the health of your business. Like, they always give you a good indicator of how well you're doing at the end of the day. In financial management, some of the key elements that the Law Society is looking for in terms of making sure that you're compliant is your client ledger, your journals, both trust receipt journal and the trust disbursement journal, and most important is your monthly reconciliation. I mean, making sure that you're doing the right reconciliation every month, capturing all your outstanding deposits, outstanding checks, and producing a client listing to make sure that you have all this stuff, is very important with respect to financial management. Now, the client ledger, even though it's a financial obligation that you have to the Law Society, it helps you as well. As clearly as I showed you in 2 seconds, if you produce a client ledger, you will know exactly what happened on that matter. Like clearly, retainer, Joe Smith, like credit card, $1,000, that's a credit. So by producing this ledger, you exactly know what happened, and that was the balance in trust after you got that. Now, when you paid for the disbursements, the balance went down by $925. So you exactly know that the ledger is a key indicator of how much balance is actually left for the client, where you are, how much money you have, and what you have spent. Okay. Now, ledger data can be seen in several other formats. Like, for example, you can say, hey, look at this. You have so much retainer, only 7% of it is actually being consumed so far. So that's one angle to look at it. Okay. Let's now go down to business management. Okay. In business management, one of the key recommendations for efficiency purposes is to use a good, reputed legal software. And if you look at both the Law Society guidelines and from both the provinces, you'll see that types of legal software are broadly classified into 5 types. One is obviously the manual double entry. I mean, if you have all the time in your hand, you can basically go for a manual double entry system, which is like an Excel spreadsheet where you kind of have all your columns and you say date, what happened, how much money, and then you calculate. It's obviously simple and inexpensive, but it's phenomenally time consuming. Once you start having more than 20, 30 clients, this really gets very highly complex, and it's very highly error prone because you're doing a lot of arithmetic calculations yourself. Now, OneWrite, it's basically you're maintaining just a simple post of subledgers, like events that happen one by one. Again, time consuming. Nothing better than the double entry. It's like, again, a lot of arithmetic errors, so we don't see a big advantage then there. Spreadsheet softwares can be good, because Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets provide you with good computation, and you can do all that stuff. Again, requires a lot of training. You got to train yourself. You got to have a lot of discipline, and all that stuff. Now, general accounting softwares is a good way to go, like QuickBooks, Xero. These are all softwares that do that. They have automatic calculation. They post subledger. The key element that's missing in general accounting software is they don't handle trust account, right? Like, because they don't handle trust account, you need to purposefully create a bank trust and a liability trust, and you need to manage that. That's fairly an advanced accounting function. So even though it's a good step in the right direction, it's still stop short of trust accounting. Now, legal accounting softwares, like uLaw or other softwares that exist, like PC Law, are designed to handle this. Like, first thing is they have all these sub-elements where they post, trust accounting and all that stuff. The key disadvantage is these accounting softwares can be expensive. Okay, some of them are not, but several of them can be very expensive. So this is kind of the guidelines that the Law Society lays out when you actually pick software. So going back, pick a good, efficient, reputed software. Ensure that you have proper security established on your files, right? And you ensure that you have a proper backup of your files. Buy proper backup software so to ensure that you have you not only store the files locally on your computer, but you also have it remotely backed up in case of fire hazard and all that stuff. Mobility is fairly new. Our statistics now show that 86% of legal professionals across North America now carry a smartphone. So make sure that, if you're using a mobile, it's robust, secure, and you have that screen lock. Your information is not just out there for everybody to access. And when you're using mobile, also be careful that applications like Facebook, Twitter, and all these ones are not picking up all your contacts. You don't want to be accidentally tweeting to someone, and Twitter has actually picked up some of your clients. So you want to make sure that you secure your mobile devices. And finally, remote access. When you're accessing stuff, for email and voice message, make sure that, you put the proper safety and security safeguards so that you can efficiently do these things. Okay. Now, professional management, on a top-level guideline, is basically we strongly recommend that you complete your CPDs on time. It's always good to be social, so be part of good membership with a good professional association, either local or provincial. Review the professional code of guidelines at a very regular interval. Also make sure that you are up to date on new legislation and case laws. These are some of the 4 guidelines that come on professional management. Let's talk about time management, because this is very key to the practice, because most legal practitioners are on the go. Things are happening in the office, things are happening outside in a meeting, and things are also happening at court. So you want to maintain a proper to-do list. A proper to-do list is what will guide you towards, what this is all about. Right in your dashboard, you want to know what are all your upcoming events. There's a settlement conference coming up on September the 29th at 9 a.m. You want to know that right here in your calendar, right? You look at your calendar, this is where I am. My monthly view looks like that. This conference is coming up all day, and it's an all-day event. So making sure that your to-do list is there is very important. Management of active files is also very key. You want to clearly segregate your files into active, closed, and archived. That way I've reached so much. These files are all closed. I don't have to look at them. These files are all archived. I really, really don't need to look at them. And this also gives you an idea. These files were done in 2012. That's when they were last modified. So you kind of have an idea when it was created, when it was last modified, what was done. You kind of have a clear idea. So make sure that you have a proper management of active files. Finally, it's all about not just docketing your billable, also docketing your non-billable. Make sure, you docket, things that you're doing for the client as a pro bono. If for some reason, in this matter, you happen to do some document review and you want to tell the client, you want to say, hey, document drafting, I'm not charging you anything for that, and it's a pro bono, and make sure that you clearly document the hours that you spent on it and hit the save button. So that way you kind of document the time you spent and the amount you're charging, even though it's a non-billable item. At the end of the day, you might want to submit a pro bono report, right, to the Law Society, so this can be very helpful. So let's look at the last bit in professional obligations, which is personal management. At the end of the day, we want to have a very satisfying legal practice, and you want to enjoy your area of practice. So take the time to actually, take this time to be actually, to review it and enjoy your practice. Okay, satisfaction with growth, progress, and financial success to your practice is very important. Record the time that you spend, and also take vacation. Take a break. Make sure that there's a proper balance between your lifestyle and the practice. Okay, and ensure that there is a proper work-life balance is achieved. And most important that people tend to ignore is proper stress management. Making sure that your stress levels are still under control, because being a legal professional is a very strenuous job. Let's now switch gears and see some of the benefits of practice management. Practice management, the reason why it's very important is because it kind of brings in 4 key guidelines. Okay, the first one is total cost of ownership. Now, the total cost of ownership is very important because, if you are spending a lot of dollars in chunks and they all add up to a large amount, then you're not invested in a proper practice management software. Make sure that if the software is just coming and then for that you need to upgrade your server, your backup strategy, you need to get IT professionals, you need to get a lot of power upgraded, your internet has to go up. That's a lot of extra costs associated with just getting one practice management software. So you want to look at it from a holistic perspective. Practice management, the biggest benefit it's obviously going to bring is efficiency to your practice. As you clearly saw, I just clicked 2 clicks and I got a retainer letter. In a couple of clicks, I got a receipt. I just put the disbursement and the ledger automatically got done. So those kind of stuff is where the efficiency is, right? It kind of seamlessly flows into your practice. You just do what you really do, but the software just manages and provides you with all the drudgery that you were doing before that you don't have to do. Compliance. Very important. We want to make sure that all the documents that you're producing are Law Society compliant. Whether it is, if you're in Ontario, you're guided by LSUC compliance. If you're in Vancouver or BC, you're basically, guided by the BC Law Society compliance. Make sure that, your ledgers, your reconciliation statements, all those key records are all maintained properly, and you kind of take them on a monthly basis. Don't wait for the last moment. Do your documents on a monthly basis so that when you get audited, it's just very simple and easy. Now, this webinar was initially prepared just for LSUC. That's why you see it says Law Society of Upper Canada, but our BC members, I want to stress that this is basically applicable to you guys. Just replace LSUC with a BC Law Society. Now, in this day and age, the practice management solution has to be a practice anywhere solution. You cannot be immobile. Just every time if I have to come into the office to switch on my computer and use my desktop software to actually do my work, I think, the efficiency is very low there. Cloud technologies have changed dramatically. They kind of, the practice just moves with you. You could be anywhere. You could be in court. You could be on the move. You could be at Tim Hortons, and the practice is really moving along with you. And they're also fairly secure, and they can be on any device. So, you got to look for options, cheap options so that, you can do practice management that basically have a low TCO, very efficient to practice. They have a proper compliance to the law society that, that you belong to, and they give you a lot of mobility. Let's look at the matter management. What's matter management? Matter management fundamentally has, 4 key elements, right? One is properly organizing the file and the management of the matter itself, file naming convention, making sure common fields, description, notes are all updated. When was the matter actually created? When was it actually managed? You want to have all that stuff. So that's file organization. When it comes to dockets, primarily, there are about 4 or 5 ways of docketing. One is you want to docket on time. One, you want to docket on flat rate, but you still want to say, how much was the time spent. One, you want to docket as a pro bono. And, finally, you want to docket, and not for yourself, but for someone else. And, let's quickly look at what a docket consists of. A docket always has the start time. When was this actually done? Let's say, this was the initial client meeting. It was done on the 22nd. You want to indicate that. The time when it was actually done. So you can say it was done at 3:30. The amount of time that you spent, maybe an hour and 36 minutes. And you can say it was a client meeting. And then comes the billable time. You work for an hour and 36 minutes. Are you really going to bill the client for an hour and 36 minutes, or maybe just an hour, right? You can just say, and I'm going to bill you for an hour, and hit the save. So another key element of client, docket management is a good description. We strongly indicate what you did, right? You want to clearly say that, process 1 was done, process 2 was done, and you want to put all these things, not only in your description, but also in the person's invoice, so that, he kind of clearly has an idea of what this matter actually entails. Okay. So phone conversations, meeting dockets, everything needs to be mentioned. Now, when dockets are not time-based, for example, let's say you attended court and you clearly, you want to put the time always, how much time you spent on it, and you may have a fixed rate. You need to establish that very clearly in the docket. You want to say, for this one, I'm charging you $375, right? You want to put that and hit the save button. So phone conversations and meeting dockets, very essential. Disbursement management, we already walked you through, several kinds of disbursements, like paying from general, paying from trust. You also want to ensure that there are other kinds of disbursements which are more unit rates that you capture as well. For example, let's say you had photocopies, right? If you just say photocopies, you want to capture how many photocopies and what's the rate. And if the photocopies was done from the office, you want to say, hey, I didn't spend even a cent on it, right? Like, you want to say that. So capturing disbursements is very key as well in the matter. Now, in our opinion, matter has the following things, right? Like, it has a common structure where you have file number, title, area of practice, and all that stuff. Matter events capture dockets. Disbursements and retainers, and all your other stuff are captured here. You want to capture additional parties. Like, you want to say, like, hey, for Joe Smith's matter, Peter Filler was actually, the defendant, right? Like, if Joe was the applicant and Peter was the defendant, you want to capture that right into the matter. And if there's any document associated with that, you want to kind of store that as well here under document management, so that everything is all filed and stored in a single place of location. Okay. Moving on, finally, the most important element as part of matter management is your matter status. Like, keeping your matter, in an active state or a closed state or an archive state is very key. And when you close matters, you also want to clearly establish when this matter was actually closed, so that when you come back to it, you can say, oh, the matter was created on 26th of July, 2016, but it was closed on September the 9th, 2016. So you kind of have an idea on how long this matter actually progressed for. Moving on to other key elements of your practice, analytics. Now, analytics are a way by which you kind of have a view of a measure of your practice and your health of your practice. Now, it's a great concept to know how well you did, and also compare, a previous month. Like, for example, if you kind of have a clear idea on how well this quarter was. Like, for example, if you want to, do your fee book by clients for this quarter, and you want to compare that with your previous quarter. So clearly in this quarter, you had 2 clients, and this is what you made. You want to compare it with your previous quarter, right? You should be able to do that as part of analytics. You can say, this is from April to June. This is my earnings, and July to September, only this is my earnings. So in 2 seconds, you'll be able to kind of look at your pie chart and say, it's looking like a very, very, very different quarter. So understanding matter analytics is very key, because it kind of gives you the state of health of your business. What are the things that are going right? What are the things that are going wrong? You will very clearly understand. Now, for sole practitioners, this is a big deal, because, trying to actually have time to compute all these things so that you can improve upon your past and failure, they don't have this time. So having the right tool that can actually provide with a measure of practice health is very, very key. Now, what matter analytics does is it empowers your law office to answer some of the tough questions. Like, for example, you can actually, ask the unanswered questions. Like, you may want to say, like, hey, for this entire, our quarter, say the first quarter of my thing, just was I even doing a profit? Yes. What was the total profit? How much was the income statement? What was the expense statement? Clearly in 2 seconds you saw that your expense and your income were so close, and that's why your profit is so low. Okay? And, understanding all those details, in terms of what was the highest category, where did I spend the maximum amount of money, who was the top one, who was the second, who was the third, my office supplies were so high, my expense on clients were the second highest, or the third highest was actually, postage and courier. Trying to understand that kind of a depth with analytics is a game changer, for your business. Lastly, with the data presented in your analytics, you can kind of change your next quarter or your next year, right? The perspective can be changed. So that's why matter analytics is very, very key. Moving on to the next one, calendaring. Now, calendaring, again, is a very key element. The reason why calendaring is very key is because, dockets determine your practice, dockets determine your billing cycle. So you want to have a good system that can synchronize your both personal calendar and your business calendar so that you are not, booking stuff for when you actually are, on vacation. So you want to make sure that there's a proper syncing there. You always want to have a calendar that can give you a daily view, a weekly view, and agenda view. And the reason why these three are very different is basically because when you look at your calendar, an agenda view very quickly tells you like how you actually are placed in this week, right? Like, you can say, oh, that's not good, I'm just going to drag this one. Or maybe like, just drag and say, oh, I'm not going to do this now, I'm going to do it tomorrow, right? Like you can just have an agenda view. When you look at it from a day perspective, right, like you're just looking at it like a task view, which is like, only partially helpful. Looking at it again from a monthly perspective gives you like how busy you are and what's going on, right? Like, so that's again an agenda week and an agenda day can give you a different perspective compared to a month view. Okay, so making sure that the calendar meets those requirements is also very important. Now, a calendar should have docketed view and your office-related stuff. Like for example, in your today, if I took a small coffee break, and I put that in my calendar, I clearly want to know, hey, which of these items are actually, client, time dockets, and which ones are actually my personal, untimed, non-billables, right? You want to clearly know that in 2 seconds. So that's the key element that you want to establish with calendar management. Okay. Moving on to forms automation. This part is only present, for we offer it for several provinces, but we don't do it for British Columbia. But forgetting our software, forms automation is a very important part of your practice. Like, there's a lot of forms that you need to fill as part of family law, small claims code, landlord and tenant, highway traffic. If the software can properly automate forms automation, that can bring a lot of benefit to your practice because it's the same information that you're typing again and again and again. Like, in my opinion, like, if this is a criminal matter, like, you just want to say document generation, forms, criminal, you want to choose the form that you actually want to do and just hit the download button, and the software just go ahead and figures it out what it needs to do and what it needs to fill, and it starts filling its way so that, like, you're not wasting your time filling some of the key elements that are very auto-fillable, like, Joe Smith, the file number, like, anything that is fillable and auto-fillable, you want to establish that the software can actually do that for you. Okay. So moving on, to the next one, which is accounting and accounting in general. Okay. Now, what is accounting? Especially what is trust accounting and what is compliant accounting? Let's establish that very clearly. The first one is accounting is basically there's one part of actually working on the matter, making sure that you bill the client, making sure that you invoice the client. But accounting is making sure that not only have you done that, but you also maintain the books for that client. Now, at the end of the day, both BC and LSUC, when you're audited, will be looking for they'll be looking for trust ledgers, they'll be looking for general ledgers, they'll be looking for journal statements, and they'll be looking for reconciliation statement. Now, if you have to maintain them manually, as the way I said, like, if you want to go back to, these types of bookkeeping systems and do it this way, you're going to be spending a lot of time making sure that the reports actually match the Law Society guidelines. Now, a seamless accounting software is very key because when you do stuff in the matter, you don't want to be repeating it again in your accounting system. Now, let's say you have spreadsheets for managing your dockets, and if you have, say, some accounting software, say QuickBooks or something like that for your accounting, now you have to go and put this in this software because your Law Society will only look at ledgers in a particular format. Then you need to take that exact same amount and post it into your accounting software so that, like, you can at the end of the day do your proper tax computation and all that stuff. Now, that's where seamless accounting really kicks in because it makes it very seamless, it makes it very easy, and you are completely in control. Now, when you do all this accounting, you want to make sure that that accounting tool can also report analytics to you. I mean, if it's collecting all your invoices in information for the past quarter, it better analyze and tell you who's your top client, who's your worst client, how much money have you made in each area of practice. So adding analytics and a powerful reporting capability with accounting is kind of mandatory. And the last thing is, when you produce your report, you want to make sure that they're as close as possible to the guidelines that the Law Society actually looks for. Like, in this case, clearly stating the particulars, because the Law Society wants to know what is it? Is it a disbursement? How was it paid? Was it paid from trust? Who's the client? What's the file number? If it was paid by check, what's the check number? What's the reason why it was paid? So the particulars should capture all those details, and that's where the compliance really kicks in, because it's not just about date and amount. You want to capture all the particulars that you already inputted into the matter as part of entering the disbursement, and that got translated into proper accounting ledgers. Now, let's look at each and every financial record that the Law Society will ask you for. Now, before I do that, I just want to make sure that I will actually do a quick invoicing and pay myself on this matter. So let me quickly do an invoice, because that'll make the ledgers look a lot more busy. Right now, we only got the money and we've done one disbursement. So let me quickly do an invoice. And after you've done the invoice, what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of do a trust transfer. Okay, in this case, I clearly know that that's the total invoice I did, and I'm going to hit on the trust transfer, and here I'm going to pick, I'm not going to pick the disbursements purposefully, and I'll say, the legal fee, and I'm going to hit the transfer button. So now when I do that, when I go to the software, and I actually do my ledgers, first I'm going to do my general ledger. When I do my general ledger, the software will clearly say, hey, the legal fee was that much, the disbursement was that much, and the other disbursement was that much, and that's what the total balance owed on this file is. Then it takes you to the next level, which is what has been paid on this account. So payment on account, it clearly tells you hey, $73 has been paid. It was done as a trust transfer for this disbursement, and $508 was for this legal fee. But guess what? This photocopy has not been done, so that's why the balance on the account is $5.65. That's exactly what the Law Society is looking for, a clean general ledger to tell what you want. Okay, so that's your general ledger. Now let's look at your trust ledger. And when you look at your trust ledger, again, it has to clearly say, we already showed that the $1,000 and the $75 withdrawal, but now the trust transfer is also shown, bringing the trust down to $343.05. So that's what the Law Society is expecting in terms of client ledgers, both trust and general. Now let's look at receipts and disbursement journals. So if I go to my accounts, and I'm just going to go the easy route, which is I'm just going to hit compliance. When I hit compliance, it tells me, hey, this is exactly what the Law Society is looking for, and let me pull them one by one. So if I just say this, and if I want, just say, a quarterly record, and let me just quickly do just a show only. It'll clearly tell me that the date, who was it received from? So, Joe Smith, James Bond, Spencer, who was it received from? And clearly tells you the reason why the trust money was actually received. Was it a retainer? Was it a settlement? What is the amount? And then the method of payment. Very important. The Law Society audits are very particular about the method of payment, and you need to have that as part of the ledger. Okay. Now going back, disbursement journals are also the same thing. If I have to go to my client disbursement journal, I want to do it for my quarter again and do a download, right? And I look at it, clearly has to establish, if you look at the guidelines, in BC, you need to establish the GST and the PST separately. If it's Ontario, you need to establish the HST. Sometimes there's only GST applicable, so you need to split it out. So clearly you say here the date, the method, paid, the description of the service, expense on it, how much is disallowed on it, the HST, and the total calculation. Another key element, that's always looked at is fee book. So if I go back to my compliance chart, if I do a fee book, again, let me quickly do quarterly fee book and do a download. And the fee book is also very, very, very similar to the general disbursement ledger, where you need to establish the fees, split it up into HST, and show the total. So, clearly you say, hey, Joe was this much, James Bond was this much, Joe Smith was this much. Kind of clearly establish, what's being done here. Okay. And finally, the monthly reconciliation statement. Now, the reconciliation statement, I'm not going to do a quick reconciliation. I'll just, kind of walk through how a reconciliation is actually done. I'm not doing a true reconciliation here. I just want to indicate, certain elements. And I'll put some fake number here. And when I do a reconciliation statement, there are some key elements that have to be part of a reconciliation statement. One is clearly stating the bank details, and the second part is clearly stating, your details. So clearly here, the bank details have to be stressed, outstanding checks have to be mentioned, outstanding deposits have to be mentioned, and then a clear record of all the client activity records with the balance has to be mentioned. Now, anybody who has zero balance may not be mentioned, but everybody who has some balance has to be mentioned, so that you're capturing. You can say, hey, Josh wrote our last transaction, August 20, 2013, and that's the check. So you have to capture that, and you have to sum it up, as part of the reconciliation statement. Now, obviously, I put some fake numbers so they didn't match, but you've got to establish that these two lines are exactly the same, so that your reconciliation is actually complete. Okay? So again, stressing on the key financial records: client ledger, trust receipt journal, trust disbursement journal, fee books, and monthly, reconciliation statements. Okay. Now, let's go back into. We have another 4 more minutes before we end the BC side of it, and then we'll go for another half an hour, for Ontario. But clearly, what we wanted to establish, in this session to summarize was, and let me quickly go up to summarize for our BC people. We wanted to establish, a professional obligation where, the client intake service communication was managed. File management is a key element. Financial management is a key element. Business management is a key element. Professional management is a key element. Time management was a key element. And personal management was also a very, very, very key element. So this kind of completes the webinar for the BC folks. We have another half an hour for getting into the accounting details, which is not certified for the BC. So anybody from BC can actually drop off at this point, while the Ontario ones, we need to have another half an hour to actually complete it. So let's now get into one key element, of our practice, which is basically, again, accounting, with trust and general. Now, what is trust management, and why should we have trust and general separate? Okay, let's talk about it. Now, one of the key benefits of having trust account, and many, some of the practitioners actually shy away from it because of its complexity, but we actually believe that trust accounting is actually good, is basically, when you have trust accounting, you have the money already there. So, the chances of you not getting paid is phenomenally reduced. Now, that's a huge issue because, in legal profession, you actually go ahead and do a lot of work. There might be travel associated with it. You definitely want to reduce the amount of risk associated with you not getting paid. So establishing a proper trust account is very, very, very important. And once you've established a trust account and your general account, in general, you want to actually have two separate accounts. One is your proper general account, which is your banking account, and maybe you have a business credit card. You want to establish that clearly, and then maybe you have out-of-pocket expenses that are actually coming from you, and you want to establish that account separately. You can call it like an owner's pocket account and establish this separately. Now, once you have established these three accounts, what you want to do is, whenever you're recording stuff, you clearly want to establish how this was done and where it was done, and make sure that the account selection is always proper. Now, some softwares make it default. Like, for example, and I'm going to reopen this matter again. Let's say you got a settlement in this matter, right? Like, if you got a settlement in this matter and you're actually depositing the settlement, you want to always make sure that the settlement deposit always goes into your trust account. Never goes. You don't even want to have an option here that accidentally, you deposit it into your general account. So let's say it is, $6,500, right? You want to establish the check, definitely who it was received from. So in this case, we said Peter, the opponent, Chen or Filler, I think, is the one who gave the check, right? And you want to make sure that you deposit it in the right account, right? And apply, right? So that's very key that, when you take things like settlement or anything like that that's actually going into the trust account, you don't record it actually going into the general, even accidentally. The second thing that you want to actually establish is when funds leave, the account. Like, for example, in new disbursement, you clearly want to say, the way you paid for it, you picked the right menu. So, like, if it's paid from trust, again, you're hitting the trust account. You're not hitting, the general account. But if you're paying from general, clearly, your general account, like, if it's your office credit card or if it's your Scotiabank general, you're actually saying what it was. So establishing a clear process of how money is coming in and how money is going out is a key to have a proper trust account management. Okay. Now, inside trust, there are some key elements that need to be maintained, like, the date when the transaction was actually done, and what is the method of, transaction is also very important. Like, it's very important to establish, who the trust money was actually received from, because not all the time the client might be the source for a trust fund. It might be some other sources, and you want to establish that. Similarly, when money is leaving trust account, it's the same thing. Like, for example, let's say you have a settlement payout, right? And this time you are sending it to Peter, to Joe. You want to make sure that your trust money is, you don't write an arbitrary check. You don't write a check for $90,000, when there's only $6,843.05 in trust. So clearly making sure that, you prevent trust violation is very important. So like if you're writing a $4,500 check, right, you want to make sure that you establish that, and then the check number, the reason, you can say settlement payout, and then you can say who was it paid to. It's being, maybe it is not Joe's, so you're paying the check to Joe's wife, so you can say Helen Smith, right? Like, and you can even print a check and process the payment right there. So clearly, as you saw, the date, the check number or the transaction detail, the memo we call it, and who was it paid to is very important. And so that's where when you actually establish, the Law Society, when you have these two trust journals, they really look for that. So again, when I go back to my compliance, let's look at the trust payment journal right now. I'm going to look at that, and I'm just going to do a show only, and you'll clearly see they are looking for who was it paid to. Was it paid to Helen Smith? Was it, in this case, obviously, you did a trust transfer, so it was paid to you, so Jason Richardson. When it was paid to Brampton Courthouse, they are looking for the paid to column. They are looking for the method how it was paid. Was it a check? And if it's a check, what's the check number? They're also looking for, details on the amount, what was paid, and what's the total amount, and the date. So these are what they are looking for in a journal. Now, similarly, in a general, receipt journal, also, similar details have to be captured, like, who is it received from, what's the purpose of the fund, why was, what's the amount that was received, and the method by which it was actually received needs to be captured in that particular transaction. We also want to understand why the Law Society is laying a lot of guidelines on fee book. Now, the fee book is very, very important because it kind of determines the total income that you made. Like, clearly they said income statement, and expense statements are very important to your business. That was one of the mandatory requirements that they say, like, maintain a proper income statement and an expense statement. Now, the reason why the income statement and the expense statement was mentioned is primarily because, that's what gives you a clear help in your business, right? Like, so let's go back to here in the financial management section, clearly have a proper income and expense statement. And let's do a couple of income and expense statements and see what they look like. I'm going to do an income statement for the year. And I'll also do a clear expense statement for that same year, and you will see the key elements that need to be brought. Now, in an income statement, the first and foremost thing that you want to know is what kind of income it was. Was it a legal work, or was it a recovery of expense income? You want to establish that. Then you want to know what kind of category it was. Was it a civil? Was it families and will? Was it real estate? You want to establish that. And then the total income in that period for that category needs to be established. And then you kind of sum it up and say, that's the total amount of income that I actually had, in this time period. Now, an expense statement is also the same, but now it's looking at the expense side of it. Now, when you look at the expense side of it as a pure number, right, it only gives you half the picture. Now, in this case, clearly it says, hey, client expense was this much, office expense was this much. Okay, but then you want to break it down and say, hey, in that, how much was stationery? How much was that? You want to break it out. Now, sometimes, expenses can actually be even client expenses. So, when you do an expense statement, now let me do, say, a entire yearly, and when you do a downloaded analytics, you will actually see a lot more visible that were not actually visible by just numbers, right? Numbers just tell you, this is how it looked like. But when you actually looked at it in a pie graph or a bar chart, it'll kind of give you oh my God, this was one of my top expense, and I need to have a handle on that, right? That's the key element. And that's why the Law Society is putting a lot of emphasis on making sure that, you have proper income and expense statement. And that way, you can make sure that your taxes, can also be managed properly, okay? Now, let's look at other requirements like detailed duplicate deposit slips. Okay, now deposit slips, have a reason, why they're constructed a certain way. Let's say, this is the cash that you actually deposited. It was received from Joe Smith, and the reason was, retainer, right? You can say retainer for matter, whatever, apply and download. Now, in the deposit slip, there are some key elements that you need to establish. You have to have, the signature of the teller. So, you kind of put your initials, and you kind of indicate whether it was a trust or a general, put the bank name, the teller has to stamp it, and then you indicate $543 into your detail, and then you kind of get it. So this is a template where we have printed most of the information, but then you can print in the other stuff that you have, and then you can file it away. So that's why, a detailed duplicate deposit is requested. Now, canceled checks, maintaining them is very obvious because, you don't want that to come back and haunt you. Similarly, original bank statements and books, there's a clear reason why we need to maintain them, okay? We want to track systematic overpayments on accounts. Let's come to that in a second, okay? Let's say the client here, and I'm going to put purposely a very large bill, and that's the only way we will be able to do this. Let's say, it was some payment. And it's very important that you understand overpayments very clearly because this is where most of the accidents, in accounting actually happen. And let's first quickly raise an invoice, and we'll talk about overpayments in a second. So you kind of have raised your invoice. You know how much you have in trust, and that's the first thing that you do is you click on it, and you are going to transfer that trust payment, right? So there's only $175 left in trust. So you want to. Oops, sorry, give me one. And you want to do that quick transfer to yourself. So you'll click on the trust, and transfer of that $175 into your account. Okay. Now, unfortunately, on this one, I established a fee cap. Let me just quickly put a small disbursement, and this is where I can explain the concept better of overpayment. Let's say application fee was for $100, so that means the client actually owes you $113. So let's quickly raise an invoice. And let's have a use case of overpayment. So when I now hit the question mark, the software is going to tell me that the client actually owes, again, it's a trust payment because there is still money left in trust. So let me put a much larger disbursement. Let me establish settlement payout. That way, paid off everything off trust, so $113 is still owed in client payment. Here you go. So now we have the overpayment scenario. So $113 is where is required. You call the client and say, hey, send me a check for $113, and he sends you, $200. Now, if you should not be depositing that $200 at all into this general account, because you clearly know that there's only $113 left in trust, as balance. So the right way to handle this overpayment is you actually take that one as a retainer and you say, hey, $200, I'm depositing that into, my trust account. Obviously, the software tried to do some distribution, and you can say, I'm going to deposit that into my trust account, and then what you actually saw as a client payment now becomes a trust transfer, and then you transfer that from your trust account to your general account. So that's very key that you understand, that, your overpayments on accounts are all captured properly so that, you don't have any accounting issues. Okay. Obviously, prompt delivery, of invoices helps you in your business to actually make the money when you have to actually do it. So some of the key recommendations here are don't keep the billing cycle too long. You want to establish a clear, 60-day billing cycle or a 30-day billing cycle where clearly the client knows that every 2 months he is going to receive an invoice from you, and you are going to actually be billing and doing the trust transfer. So, and establishing in your invoice itself a clear guideline on what you're actually doing and how much money you're withdrawing from trust, indicating that in the invoice is actually good. You can even put a nice paid watermark and tell the client, hey, this is all done, and you can take care of it right there. Now, finally, one thing is, you want to maintain your records at least on a monthly basis. I mean, the reconciliation has to be done, on the 25th of the month. So you use that as an excuse to make sure that not only you do reconciliation on all the compliance documents, but you also look at your business health. Go and look at your expenses, make sure that you have a good eye on them. Look at all your bank statements to see, if there's a misappropriation of funds or, some credit card transaction is invalid, if your credit card was actually inappropriated. So financial management is just not about compliance with the Law Society. It's making sure that your business is healthy, everything is all good, and, you make sure that, all your expenses and your incomes are all managed properly at the end of the day. At this time, we are running out of time, and we are going to look for questions. I'm just going to look at how do you invoice funds that are paid directly to the client, such as replacement in WSIB accident when nothing will be recorded in the docket. Okay, now that's not you don't want to approach it like that. To me, docket has several types. Like, as we explained it here, like, you don't want to make I'll repeat the question. The question is like, it finally comes down to like, do I have to always invoice on time? And the answer is no. You don't have to always invoice on time. You can also invoice on a flat rate. Like, there are several instances, where accident benefits and WSIB, where, the income is on a settlement or the income is on a post this basis. Now, you clearly want to docket. Like, there's no excuse on non-docketing because you want to measure the amount of time that you actually spent on it. If you had a client meeting, if you had attended the court, you want to put a docket and you want to clearly establish, what you did. But having said that, when you do that, how you bill, it's pretty much dependent on the area of practice. Now, if you talk about family law, if you talk about, criminal and all these things, they definitely love to docket by time. Like, they want to docket everything by time and bill by time. A telephone conversation, you want to basically make sure that it's all billed. But absolutely, in WSIB case and all those ones, you clearly want to say, hey, we docketed on time, but we're not billing on time. We're actually billing it by dollar amount. And that's where, even the pro bono, in our opinion, is very important that you docket, because at the end of the day, when you actually do a pro bono docket, report, right, and you want to establish how much, time you spend, it's very key that that report tells you, how much money, how much time did you do this year as pro bono. Like, and the pro bono report actually has to have a few components, like, the potential of earnings and the time you actually gave away as a pro bono has to be very clearly established, not just on cumulative level. It also has to be established at an individual level, like, who got the pro bono. So clearly here, like, who are all the people who got the pro bono and which date they got it. A summary by client, and then, in percentage, who's the best. Like, look like Mr. JJ really enjoyed a lot of pro bono here, right? And kind of gives you like a charty view of that. And then, this is a great way of summarizing your practice. Like, 98% of what you're supposed to bill, you bill. Only 2%, was actually pro bono. So, that's where, again, answering your question, like, docketing, no matter whether you are billing it as billable or not, is very important. How you bill it, the software should have the means to actually do that. Another good question here, which is talking about outstanding, balance. Outstanding balance is, again, like, it's very simple and easy. Like, most accounting softwares have to maintain that. Like, if you actually do an invoice balance report, right, the software has to tell you on an individual client basis how much was billed, how much has been paid so far, and how much is the balance, and is the balance fully recoverable from trust, or the balance is like, left to be actually recovered from, the client in general. A classic example is, if you look at, let me look at this example, like, Mr. John Smith, you kind of bill him $169,850 is there in trust, so you can actually withdraw the entire $169 from trust. But if you actually look at this one, there's only $500 in trust. So it means even though Greg Smith, you billed him $1,130, $500 can come from trust, but $630 has to come from him. So at the end of the day, we just summarize that, like, out of this $37,000 that is owned on this fake account, $11,000 actually comes from trust, and only $26,000 has to come, as outstanding balance. Okay. How do you invoice money that you haven't received into your account? Client receives $2,000 in income replacement, and you're billing a percentage of what they received. How do you manage that in your software? Now, that's pretty, when you go to the matter, under your action, you can always hit contingencies. Like, you can say, that's a clear contingency billing. You can say, hey, that's what my client received, $34,000, and I am docketing 25% of that because that belongs to me. Now, a proper way is like, hopefully that settlement will flow through you. So this $34,000 will actually come to your trust account, and you will be able to pay yourself $85,000. But here you go, clearly, if you want a percentage billing, you can always add it to the matter, and it'll add it, and the contingency clearly tells you what's the negotiated settlement, and it puts you all that stuff, and then you can hit the save. So that's a very simple way, and most accounting softwares actually do that. And tracking that, is also very key, because you have to know that not only you put the contingency, how much you got paid and when it got paid, also needs to be tracked. Another key question that was asked is, there's so much in analytics for me to consume. How do I know what's important, what's not important? That's a good question. I think that comes with practice. To me, not every report is useful. All accounting softwares produce hundreds and hundreds of reports. They slice and dice, the data, and they can provide you with hundreds and hundreds of reports. To me, some key reports like this are very, very, very valuable. For example, Nathan Wilson is the oldest client, and he hasn't paid me from 2013. Do I even want to keep that client active? Should I close that matter? Write it off? Very key, information. The one with the highest trust balance, the client who owes me the most, Laura Metcalf owes me this much from May 2016. Should I take the phone and actually make a phone call to get paid? So reports like this are very important. Insights also are very important, because not all the time you know certain things. For example, there are reports that tell you, in uLaw, that tell you, how much money you just spent on photocopies, and have you actually recovered that much money that you have actually spent on photocopies? Because that kind of tells you that your disbursement strategy for your business is not healthy, right? So these are some of the key elements that come with with good analytical reports. Again, another question that I want to see is, I'm just trying to skim through the questions here. Okay, so people are asking about software cost. This is a CPD session, so I will stay away from answering questions about our product. We'll keep it more generic. You can always go to our website and look at our cost, and the features that we do. Form filling. Okay. Do you do immigration forms? At this point, no. That's even forms we only do for very certain silos of provinces. We do for Ontario. We do for Alberta. We do for Newfoundland and Labrador. We are looking at BC. At this point, we don't do forms. And we don't have immigration forms. So to the forms that that we do are small claims, landlord and tenant, accident benefits, and criminal. Now, why is form filling useful? I don't have to really stress on that. It saves time. At the end of the day, if it's cookie cutter information and you're filling it again and again, you're better off to use a form filling software to actually help you aid and make quick gains on that. Finally, I have one last question, which is how do you handle write-offs and discounts? Oh, that's a good point. Now let's talk about accounting aspect of write-offs and discounts. Now, when you actually invoice a client, okay, the way if you have to put it in layman's terms, you establish that this is the total amount that the client has been billed, and this is the HST on top of it. Okay. Now, once you have done that, the client has to pay you that. Now, when he does not pay you that, you are still liable for that HST, because the very fact that you actually invoiced, you are liable for that HST, right? Now, the only way you can eliminate that HST is by applying a proper write-off or a proper discount, in that matter, right? To give a quick example, let me actually create a quick. Hopefully, we'll have an example that we can do. Here you go. So in this case, the client owes us $159.35. Now, if I clearly look at this, this was a matter done in 2013 probably the HST was collected right in that time frame, and it might have been established there. Like clearly the HST was collected, and he owes that money. Now, this is where it gets tricky, right? Like if you don't apply the proper write-off, right? Like I'm going to do a quick write-off here, right? And I'm going to apply 159.35. And immediately split it into the amount and the HST. So when you apply a discount or a write-off, it clearly tells you like this is the amount that you're actually incurring as a loss. That's the government's HST that you're actually not going to be paying, basically because that was a write-off to you. So to answer the question, you have to apply it right in the matter so that you can kind of recover that HST portion at least. The rest is obviously a loss that you want to put it right there so that you kind of know that you didn't make the money in that matter. I think with that we kind of come to an end. Again, as a housekeeping exercise, we strongly recommend, because this was a combined CPD with both British Columbia and Ontario, when you're sending your email to us confirming, please send us whether you're from Ontario or from BC so that we can accordingly mark the proper ledger, because we need to report to both the law societies. Once again, thank you so much for having us. It was a pleasure, giving this webinar. This is the 11th in our series, and we have several more to come. Please go to our website and register for more webinars. We have a few very interesting ones that are coming up. Immediately. If you already registered for this one, you will be getting a reminder notice for the rest, because it is a single this one. The next few are more regarding our software. They are not CPD. Like we have one very specifically on form filling. We have one on document management. We have one on trust reconciliation demystified. We'll be specifically talking about trust accounting. That's a 1-hour professionalism credit just for Ontario. With this, I want to end this webinar. Thank you again for the opportunity, and we look forward for hearing from you. If you have any feedbacks, feel free to send it to us as well. Thank you. Bye.